Welcome back to the Book Nook podcast, everyone. We're ready to jump into another deep dive, and today we're turning the pages of Elsie Silver's Wild Side.
Oh, I'm so excited for this one. Wild Side sounds like it's got all the ingredients for a truly captivating read. And as always, we've done our homework.
Yes, we have. For this deep dive, we're drawing from a fantastic mix of sources. We've got two enthusiastic book reviews, one from Jeeves Reads Romance, the other from Angel Reads.
We also have a YouTube interview transcript with Elsie Silver herself. It's from PIX 11 News, and it offers some really interesting insights into her writing process and inspirations.
Absolutely. And to round things out, we've got another reader's overview that spills some juicy secrets about the plot, particularly the hero's unusual profession. But before we get into all that, if you're loving what you hear so far and you want to dive into Wild Side yourself, you can find a link to buy the book in the description below.
Always a good reminder. Now, where do we even begin with this one? There's so much to unpack.
Yeah.
What about we start with an initial hook? What grabs the reader's attention right from the get-go?
Sounds good to me. Jeeves Reads Romance, right off the bat, declares Wild Side a new favorite. They're already gushing about the hero's devotion, even calling him a marshmallow of a man, which I have to admit is a pretty intriguing description for a romance hero.
A marshmallow man, huh? That definitely piques my curiosity. And they also mention this messy and angsty history between the main characters, Tabitha and Rhys. Sounds like there's a lot of emotional baggage to unpack there.
Definitely. Now, Angel Reads, while equally enthusiastic, sets the scene a bit more, emphasizing Elsie Silver's status as an auto-buy author. I mean, that says a lot about her ability to craft stories that resonate with readers, right?
Oh, absolutely. An auto-buy author is someone whose books you just know are going to be good. You don't even need to read the blurb. You just trust their storytelling.
Exactly, and they highlight the central premise of Wild Side. Tabitha unexpectedly becoming guardian to her nephew, Milo, and Rhys, who's described as this important figure from her sister's past, suddenly stepping into the picture. So right away, we have this sense of upheaval in Tabitha's life, a big change that's thrust upon her.
And that sense of place, of being rooted in a community, seems to be a hallmark of Silver's writing. That comes across pretty clearly in her interview with PIX 11. She talks about growing up between the city and the countryside with a heavy dose of competitive horseback riding thrown into the mix.
I can definitely see how that blend of experiences would influence her storytelling. It's that mix of grounding and excitement that often comes with small town life, wouldn't you say?
For sure. And she specifically mentions that those small town settings are a recurring element in her work. So you can imagine how that close-knit community might play a role in the unfolding drama between Tabitha and Rhys.
Totally. Now, the interview also drops some hints about the romantic tropes at play here. Elsie Silver herself confirms that enemies to lovers and marriage of convenience are central to the plot, which, let's be honest, are two incredibly popular tropes in the romance genre.
Oh, for good reason. They're classic for a reason. But the challenge, I think, is how you take those familiar elements and make them feel fresh and exciting. So how do you see those tropes playing out in Wild Side, based on what we've gathered so far?
Well, let's start with the enemies part. Jeeves Reads Romance describes their history as messy and angsty, which doesn't exactly scream love at first sight, right?
No, not exactly. But it does suggest a past connection, something significant that went wrong. And remember, Angel Reads calls Rhys an enigma. So there's clearly more to him than meets the eye, which could definitely contribute to some initial misunderstandings or even outright animosity.
And then we have this little bombshell from another reader's overview. Rhys is a professional wrestler who wears a mask. Now that throws a whole new wrench into the mix, doesn't it?
A masked wrestler. Okay, now I am really intrigued. That's not your typical romance hero profession. So we've got these two seemingly clashing individuals thrown together by circumstance. Tell me more about Tabitha. What kind of person is she, according to our sources?
Well, both Jeeves Reads Romance and Angel Reads paint a picture of a strong, independent woman. They describe her as sassy, resilient, and someone who can definitely hold her own. Jeeves Reads Romance even says she can go toe-to-toe with Rhys, which suggests she's not one to back down from a challenge.
I love that. She sounds like a real firecracker. And Angel Reads also emphasizes her deep love for her nephew, Milo. They really highlight her fierce devotion to him, which, given her sudden guardianship, makes total sense.
And let's not forget that grounding detail from the reader's overview. Tabitha is a chef and restaurant owner, so we're not just talking about someone who's strong emotionally. She's also successful and established in her own right.
Right. That detail really adds depth to her character. It shows she's capable and independent, which makes her sudden vulnerability, her need for help with Milo, even more impactful. So what about Breschwitz? We've got this intriguing description of him as a marshmallow man with a tender, gooey heart, but also as an enigma who prefers solitude. How do we reconcile those seemingly contradictory traits?
Well, I think Jeeves Reed's romance hits the nail on the head when they say he embraces his role as husband and guardian. It's like underneath that quiet exterior, there's this wellspring of protectiveness and care. And remember, he steps up to claim guardianship of Milo, which suggests he's not afraid of commitment or responsibility.
That's a great point. And Angel Reeds is careful to note that the initial tension between him and Tabitha seems to stem from miscommunication rather than genuine dislike. So there's that potential for growth, for that initial spark to reignite once they clear the air and actually get to know each other.
And knowing that he's this masked wrestler adds a whole other layer to his personality, doesn't it? It's like he's got this secret identity, this hidden part of himself that he keeps separate from the rest of the world.
Oh, absolutely. It makes you wonder what kind of persona he embodies in the ring as Wildside. Is it an extension of his true personality or something entirely different? And how does that masked identity affect his interactions with Tabitha, especially in the context of their forced marriage?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's like how much of Wildside bleeds into his everyday life. And the reader overview reveals that Rhys is originally from Florida and grew up in foster homes, which adds a layer of complexity to his background. You could see how those experiences might have shaped his personality, his need for solitude, maybe even his protective instincts.
Absolutely. It's like Elsie Silver has given us these little puzzle pieces about his past, and we, as readers, have to try to piece them together to understand the man beneath the mask.
Now, speaking of puzzle pieces, let's talk about the central conflict, the event that really sets the story in motion. All our sources point to the same catalyst, the passing of Tabitha's sister, Erica.
Such a tragic event. And it immediately creates this void, this sense of loss that permeates the entire story. And of course, it leads to that contested guardianship of Milo, which is where the real drama begins.
Yes. Tabitha, naturally, assumes she'll be the one to care for Milo, but then Rhys steps in, asserting his own claim. And that's where the marriage of convenience trope comes into play, right?
Exactly. It sounds like Tabitha, desperate to keep Milo in Rose Hill, and perhaps fearing Rhys might take him back to Florida, sees marriage as the only way to secure her guardianship. Talk about a high-stakes situation.
Right. And with the existing animosity between them, even if it's based on misunderstanding, you can just imagine how tense and awkward things must get when they're suddenly living under the same roof as husband and wife.
The book blurb, quoted in both reviews, describes the tension as palpable. I mean, you can practically feel the sparks flying. Or maybe, in the beginning, it's more like a lot of icy silence and forced politeness.
Either way, it's that forced proximity that makes the enemies to lovers trope so delicious. And it seems like Elsie Silver doesn't rush things. It's described as a slow burn, with their relationship evolving gradually as they navigate the challenges of co-parenting Milo and trying to make this marriage of convenience work.
Slow burns are the best. It's all about that buildup, that gradual shift from animosity to attraction. And Jeeves Reed's romance hints at a sizzling turn later in the book. So we know those sparks eventually ignite.
Oh, they definitely do. The other reader even mentions Rhys wearing his mask during a steamy scene. Now that's a detail I didn't see coming.
Oh, wow. Talk about a unique twist. That definitely adds a layer of intrigue to their intimate moments. But beyond the romance and the contractual obligations, Wildside also delves into some deeper emotional themes.
Absolutely. Angel Reeds specifically mentions the themes of grief and healing. It's not just about Tabitha and Rhys finding their way to each other. It's about all three of them, including Milo, coping with the loss of Erica and finding a path toward healing as a family.
And speaking of Milo, he's more than just a plot device. Angel Reeds calls him the light of this book. A pure and loving child who brings a much-needed dose of sweetness and innocence to a rather complicated situation. His bond with Tabitha and his growing admiration for Rhys must be so heartwarming to witness.
I agree. And even amidst all the drama and emotional turmoil, we also get glimpses of the everyday moments, the small acts of kindness that show the gradual softening of their hearts. Angel Reeds mentions Tabitha cooking for Rhys and him making sure she's taken care of, which suggests a growing sense of intimacy and concern, even if it's initially disguised as practicality.
It's those little details that really bring the story to life, right? And before we forget, if you're enjoying this deep dive into Wildside and you want to stay up to date on all our bookish discussions, don't forget to subscribe to the Book Nook podcast and leave us a review. We love hearing from you.
Absolutely. Now, back to Rose Hill. It sounds like the small town setting is more than just a backdrop. The reviews mention appearances from characters from Elsie Silver's previous books, especially during scenes set in the single dad's bowling league, which another reader found really funny, even though Rhys apparently sucks at bowling.
Ah, that's adorable.
Yeah.
It sounds like Elsie Silver has created this rich, interconnected world where we get to revisit familiar faces and see how their stories continue to unfold. And adds that sense of community, that feeling of belonging that often draws readers to small-town romances.
For sure. And Jeeves Reed's romance specifically points out those swoony my wife moments and instances where Russ's actions speak louder than words. It's like, despite their initial animosity, there's this underlying tenderness that gradually emerges, revealing a true depth of their connection.
It's all about that slow burn, that gradual peeling back of the layers to reveal the vulnerability beneath. And speaking of layers, it seems Wildside also sets the stage for the next book in the series, Wildcard, which focuses on Bash and Gwen, according to another reader.
So it sounds like Elsie Silver has crafted a world that readers can really immerse themselves in, with interconnected characters and storylines that span multiple books, which is great for those who love a good series.
Absolutely. But both Jeeves Reed's romance and the PIX11 interview assure us that Wildside can be enjoyed as a standalone. So even if you haven't read the previous books in the Rose Hill series, you can still dive right in and get swept away by the story.
That's always reassuring to know. So to wrap things up, it seems like Wildside offers a really compelling mix of elements. We've got the classic enemies to lovers and a marriage of convenience tropes, but with the added twist of a masked wrestler hero.
And let's not forget the emotional depth, the exploration of grief and healing, and the heartwarming bond between Tabitha, Rhys, and Milo. It's a story about finding love and family in the most unexpected of places.
Absolutely. So what aspect of this setup really jumps out at you? What makes you want to pick up Wildside and get lost in its pages?
For me, it's the mystery surrounding Rhys. Unraveling the layers of his personality, understanding how he reconciles his public persona as Wildside with his private life as a husband and guardian, that's what I'd be most eager to discover.
That's a great point. And how does Tabitha, the strong, independent woman, navigate that duality in her partner? It's a recipe for some seriously compelling character development.
Exactly. There's so much potential for both conflict and connection. So on that note, we want to thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Elsie Silver's Wildside.
We hope this conversation has sparked your interest and maybe even inspired you to add this book to your to-be-read list. And if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to the Book Nook podcast and leave us a review. We love hearing from you.
And, of course, if you're ready to dive into Wildside yourself, you can find a link to purchase the book in the description below. Happy reading, everyone!
Thank you for listening to the Book Nook podcast. Check the link in the description to get your copy of the book.